started doing that, and so these things start happening. But again, it's not so that they're malicious. They have good intentions, perhaps, behind wanting their pastor to dress that way. They just don't understand, again, they haven't been educated, like we're doing tonight, in terms of what some of the purpose is behind these things. Okay, how are a pastor's vestments God clothes? You get that one?
Is that the reason it's hiding the man, and it's actually so that the pastor can do God's work for him.
Yeah.
And yet, the person isn't going to look at the man.
Right.
In the Old Testament, I think that some of the reason that the vestment, that God had the leaders of the Israel congregation, if you would put it that way, the Israelite congregation, dress specifically in certain ways was to point out that he had chosen them and put them aside for a special purpose.
Yes.
And that they would recognize that. And in fact, if anyone else tried to perform some of the offices of these of the priests and the scribes and Levites, they were punished.
Yeah, sometimes
summarily. Yes. Yeah. So.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff.
So it was a warning too, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, and it's a little difficult for me to be leading the study tonight because, in a way I almost feel a little sheepish, like I'm being self-gratifying by, holding up the pastoral office. But again, that's not the point. The point is about the office that many different men occupy, with very different personalities and life experiences and things like that. But there is one office, and that's the great thing about vestments, and I think that's the point that was trying to be made here, is that if you're a pastor, you pretty much do the same things no matter where you are. If you're a pastor, you pretty much dress the same as your fellow pastors to indicate that, you are part of this one ministry that's been given by Christ to proclaim the gospel, to baptize, to forgive, to give the Lord's Supper. And that's really what it's all about. It is a way to hide the man and to showcase the one who's really at work behind all these men who occupy the one ministry.
And isn't that what choir robes really were initially designed for as well? So that when the church choir is singing, like when we used to sing, we used to wear the choir robes or whatever, but that was my understanding, was so that, you yourself weren't being the focal point. You were a group, you were singing together.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the impression given if on Sunday morning Pastor Kempen came out dressed in an Alban stole, and I came out in a t-shirt and shorts. What impression would be given to God's people if that were to happen?
They're immediately going from church to the youth thing.
Yeah, there's a youth group event right afterward. But I mean, if the things come to my mind are that, well, first of all, we're not on the same page.
That's what I was going to say.
And second of all, we're certainly not going to be doing the same thing. We're not called to be doing the same thing if I'm dressed like this and he's dressed like that.
When did pastors start wearing stoles?
When did pastors start wearing stoles?
I can remember our Lutheran pastors growing up, always dressed in black.
Yeah.
Always had a black gown
Now
on.
see, Pastor Shadle, when he was here, I remember he had the long black, but then the shorter white, but no stole.
Yeah.
That's what my picture of
And
him.
when we were in Germany a few months ago, we went to both the Lutheran church and a Catholic church over there. And priest and pastor, all black, no stole.
Yeah, I don't know the exact history behind it, Chuck, but stoles are a fairly recent innovation. I can tell you that. They weren't around even 100 years ago. I know that for certain.
Oh, not.
No.
Because I'm not that old.
I'm saying in terms of, anywhere. They just may not have been where you were. I'm saying I don't think they were anywhere in the world 100 years ago.
I have to look at my confirmation picture, but I think they just had black on.
Yeah. And that certainly...
I never remember wearing white.
Right. And that certainly set them apart from people still, even in that kind of garb. The same purpose was still served back then. But you know what? There was an element in that older Lutheranism, of course, older Lutheranism 400 years after Luther himself. A movement called Pietism wreaked a lot of havoc on Luther and his legacy. And I guess less is better was kind of the motto that these folks live by. In other words, when you came to worship, the music should be fairly straightforward, not embellished. There should be no laughing, no smiling. There certainly was no smiling in pictures back of the old pastors. Everything was done very orderly and seriously. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the way the culture was back
Was
then.
that a holdover from the Quaker movement?
Well, the Quaker movement is tied into the Pietist movement, but the Pietist movement actually came out of Lutheranism. It's kind of an embarrassing thing for us to have to own up to, is it actually came out of Lutheranism and infested all of Christianity, honestly. But I'm saying the fact that pastors used to wear black, I think, is certainly tied into that.
Yeah.
That very toned down, basic, not embellish anything, you know. And I think in a way, Pietism was a reaction against Roman Catholicism with all its ornateness and beauty. And so, you know, stoles even like these, you know, would have been terrible in the Pietist view as being, you know, way too fancy and you know, putting way too much focus on the man. Actually, the opposite of what we're trying to say that they do here. So yeah, the culture has shifted. I'm not saying that Pietism is dead, because it's certainly alive and well. But I think in some ways the culture has changed. You know, it's typical now to smile for a picture. It's typical now to wear colorful clothes. It's now socially acceptable to laugh in church, occasionally at least. You know, things like that. We've talked about the main purpose of vestments already. They are simply to hide the individuality of the man and glorify God. An alb is simply the loose-fitting white garment. See right here. And why is an alb white? Did the guest speculate?
Purity.
Latin name for the color.
Yeah, okay.
Purity of Christ.
Yes, Christ's purity. It does remind us that our sins are white as snow. You know, there's that as you were talking about the surplice and cassock, the white over black thing. That's a very powerful image of having the black covered up by white. And really, we do the same thing with the alb and our clerical shirts, not at least too. I mean, our clerical shirts are black, and they are covered with the white alb on Sunday morning. A stole is simply another garment that is worn over a pastor's shoulders. A pastor receives the stole at ordination, and this is the one that's received at ordination, the red one.
Makes sense.
And Cassie embroidered keys on here because of the office of the keys being given to the pastoral office, and that's why those happen to be on the ordination stole. There is a lot of rationale behind the symbols on the stole, and that's something that we should not overlook as well. When we talk about stoles as being teaching vehicles, you know, what's actually printed on them can do just as much of a job, if not more, of teaching.
I suggested one time that we have a Bible class on symbolism in the Lutheran Church.
Yeah, Christian symbols.
Chalices and Greek letters.
Yeah.
And,
That'd be interesting.
There's a lot
you
to
know,
it.
and things like that, they're in circle rings, you know, three in circle rings.
Mm-hmm.
You see them in Luther's small catechism,
Yeah.
but just talking about the symbolism and what they're supposed to be, you see them on these embroidered on the vestments.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of people don't have any clue. I mean, I think some of us assume that, well, of course, you know what the three circles are. It's the Trinity. Duh.
I-N-R-I, what is it? I-N-R-I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a stack of cards I bought from Concordia for Sunday school 7 years ago.
There's